The point is, I'm saying that not every woman is straight, and some of us like to read stories about female couples doing it. Hey y'all, welcome back to Mama Loves Manga. I'm here for another manga chat. I'm really excited about this one. I just found out about it on Twitter like a day or two ago. Ordered it, it's here. I just finished reading it and oh my gosh, it's so good. It's called Eve and Eve. There you go. And this is by Nagashiro Rouge. It was released by 7 Seas and you guys, it's so good. This is a Yuri anthology and it is rated for mature audiences. So yes, it is explicit, not meant for people under the age of 18. Unless of course your parents, you know, your guardians are totally cool with it. Most of the stories are very sci-fi and you know what, let's just get into the stories. One thing I will say that I love about this anthology is that at the end, they have a summary for all of the stories. So this is gonna be a different review. What I'm gonna do is read the summaries and then give my take. So we're gonna start with the first story, which is called I Want to Leave Behind a Miraculous Love. This is a Yuri story about 2 characters who find themselves alone in the world. This was my second submission to Yuri pregnancy. Rather than approaching the story from a question of how a pregnancy would occur, I started with the paths the characters themselves took to get where they are. The rather over-the-top description of the end of times at the beginning is meant to avoid undue influence of any one specific apocalypse scenario. The Russian is a tribute to my own brief study of the language in the past. I found the language to be quite difficult, but I love the way it sounds and the shape of the Cyrillic characters. So this summary was written by the author, which I think is really cool. So the first short story, I Want to Leave Behind a Miraculous Love, is a Yuri about 2 young women who are probably the last people on Earth. There is a whole explanation as to what happened. It is over the top. Of course, as the summary says, it is about pregnancy between 2 women. And I don't want to give any spoilers away, but it's so interesting. It plays with the question of why people choose to have children or why people desire to have children. As someone who has 2 children, and I love my children so much, I do sometimes wonder, like, why? Like, why do people want to have kids? Surely it's not just this biological thing, like, because we want to populate the Earth, because the Earth is very populated at the moment. We don't really need more people. This story hit me in the feels. So well written. Yes, there are explicit scenes, but it doesn't feel male gazy, which that's a topic that I think I want to talk about, is the male gaze idea, because I think sometimes, especially with Yuri, a lot of people throw that term around as if women don't also appreciate the beautiful body of a woman. I know that on the outside, like if you look at my life in general, I seem like I'm cis, het, and all those, you know, those words, but I'm actually not straight. I know people assume that I am because I'm married to a man. I'm not straight, boo. Moving on to story 2. Story 2 is called The Case of Echo and Lisa. This was a Yuri story between a human and a machine. I was intrigued by the idea of combining Yuri with characters from a distant future setting, a manga artist, and a sex bot. The characters and plot came to me as early as 2014. Lisa was originally just a plain old sex doll, but I'm so glad to have been able to present it as my first one-shot story in Yuri Hime. However, I'd never created a Yuri story, or any story for that matter, before that didn't include a sex scene. Because of this, I had an incredibly difficult time coming up with a climax for this one, as well as a way to convey the characters' emotions. This story gave me an acute sense of how hard it can be to create manga. Nevertheless, perhaps someday we'll see love between a human and machine, and that their love will bear fruit. That story was also really sweet. Again, I don't want to say too much about this one, but it brings up the question, can a human and a robot love each other. Story 3, Top or Bottom, the Showdown. I do want to add that so far the first 2 stories centered around adult people. This third story kind of scared me a little bit because it does center around schoolgirls, but it was done so freaking well. The mangaka writes, "This is a Yuri story in which the characters determine their own bedroom dynamic. I wanted the chance to harness the power of female high school student characters in one of my stories. The unfathomable energy of those types of characters is what makes an over-the-top, absolutely absurd tale like this possible. The story is just 12 pages long, but includes 5 distinct characters. I wanted to give myself an opportunity to practice coming up with more variation among my casts. I think those qualities cause the story to feel the most out of place in this collection, but I'm happy to have been able to create and share such a lively, upbeat story." And yes, it does feel very out of place with the rest of the story. It's a very innocent story, and I will say just right off the bat, there are no explicit scenes in that story, which I really appreciate because, like I said in my previous video, I don't mind teen sexuality. I just don't really like to see it depicted personally, and I was worried about that, but oh my gosh, it was so good and it was so funny, and actually the ending of it is it's just adorable, and I felt myself I was like, cute. Like, it was so cute. It made me think of like when I was in high school and me and my girlfriends would sit around and just talk about all the kinds of random stuff. Yes, they were talking about something sexual, but it's so sweet. It's just so well done and so relatable, and I absolutely loved that short story. Moving on to short story 4 is called An Infidelity Revisited. Spicy. This is a Yuri story about a hopeless encounter. The fact that the act of cheating is what brought these two together in the first place means that they are forever unable to get along, not as lovers, friends, or even just casual acquaintances. I felt like a frustrating relationship like that would make for a compelling narrative. After all, if Midori and Azusa had started out in a proper relationship with each other, they might have made a great couple. As a writer, I hope I was able to convey that way in which logic eludes us even as adults, and the incredible impact that our feelings can have on us. My storyboards for this one seem to come together almost effortlessly, and I'm personally quite fond of how it turned out. Yes! Okay, so this one also, it was also good. It is a story of infidelity. It is a story of 2 women who had an encounter with each other when they were in high school and met again years later and had another encounter. Both times they were dating people, and it's them kind of having a lapse of judgment and dealing with that. Story number 5 is titled Heir to the Curse. This is a story about friendship and love. The theme of Yuri pregnancy was a new one for me. So again, Yuri pregnancy. As I considered how 2 female characters might impregnate each other, the idea of a curse struck me as particularly fascinating. I was inspired by another story known as The Snake Pin, though the actual plot and characters turned out quite differently. The idea of an isolated village with a tradition handed down through the centuries was an original element. I found it to be such a compelling plot device that I thoroughly enjoyed my time spent creating this tale. The idea of Yuri pregnancy is definitely something I'd like to revisit. So this is another Yuri pregnancy story. I think out of all of the stories, this was my least favorite, mainly because it starts in a way that, okay, you know the common complaint with yaoi or BL, that a lot of the relationships have a tendency to start with one of the guys forcing himself on the other. This story started similarly, and it was off-putting. It almost had a horror element. I think if it had been a horror story, I would have been less put off by it because it was scary. But in the end, there was definitely a redemption story, which I don't know, when you force yourself on somebody, no. It was very interesting though. And if you're not sensitive to relationships that are started very suspiciously, then you might enjoy that short story. But moving on to story 6, Eternity 1 and 2, Eve and Eve. This is a story about brains. I wanted to create a story with an intense spiritual component to it. A Yuri story that honors spirituality should be able to fill the demands of its genre, even if its characters are nothing more than disembodied organs. I fashioned sex scenes in my Yuri stories in accordance with the belief that physical relationships are something more than just mutual stimulation towards climax. This tale was, in a sense, the antithesis of this. A relationship in which the physical form has been done away with completely. That departure made this a particularly challenging piece. Initially, it was just 12 pages of a couple of brains having a conversation in a fish tank in outer space. At some point, however, it turned into something far greater. A dialogue on the nature of eternity and love. I had a flood of ideas when I created this story, and looking back, I worry that I was not a capable enough storyteller to get them across. That said, the 2-page spread of the brains is my favorite thing about this entire book. Thank you for reading Nagashiro Rouge. So, I kind of disagree with Nagashiro's feelings that their storytelling abilities weren't there, because I think they did a great job with that last story. It's about 2 women who are in love, and they make the decision to basically give their brains to science, and their brains are implanted into these 2 satellites. This story also brings into question, like, okay, even if you are able to live forever, is your love actually going to last? Like, is love really eternal? This anthology was so freaking good. I loved it so much. I can't really show too much of the art because, you know, like I said, there are explicit scenes, but I think showing y'all the title pages kind of was enough. Here's another gorgeous page. I would highly recommend this story to people who are interested in Yuri. If you're not interested in Yuri, especially explicit Yuri, then don't pick this up because you will not like it. But if you are a fan of Yuri and you love wonderful storytelling, you will absolutely love this. I'm so glad I took a chance and picked this up because I had never heard of it before. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. Totally worth it. The cover is absolutely stunning. There's a color page that I think I can show. Can I show this? That's not too explicit. So that's all I have for today's manga chat. I'm gonna go. Thank y'all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye. It is a love story between a mangaka and a sex bot, which is so funny that there's a sex bot in this anthology when my last anthology also had a sexadroid. Wow, what kind of stuff do I read? Anyway.